All right, well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the UC Exploring Your Identity Abroad series. This is the info session and student panel for LGBTQ plus students and allies across the UC system who are interested in studying abroad. So we've teamed up with RCSGD, that's the Resource Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity at our UCSB campus, who is also co-hosting this session and will serve as a resource to you throughout the presentation if you have LGBTQ specific questions. So whether you're a student in the pre-departure phase, currently applying, or are an outbound student, this session will help prepare students with the tools and knowledge and confidence, of course, that they need abroad as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. So just a few logistical things. The session will be recorded today. Participants, please feel free to keep your cameras off. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can enter them into the chat and Nathan can let us know if there's any questions that pop up in the chat. Once the student panel begins and we start asking our panelists questions, feel free to unmute yourselves or type your questions into the chat. Either way works great. So my name's Janine Mustafa. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a regional advisor again at the UCSB Education Office. And I'm hosting the LGBTQ session as part of the Exploring Your Identity Abroad series. So this is a UC-wide collaborative effort to offer identity-based sessions specific to underrepresented populations in study abroad. So I'm very excited to be hosting this session today, as I truly believe that study abroad is for everyone, and we want to make it accessible as possible for everybody. As a regional advisor, one of my goals is to really try to break down those barriers for students who are interested in studying abroad, but at the same time, make students aware of some of the challenges they may face when studying abroad as a member of the LGBTQ community. I feel like sometimes in my advising world, we talk so much about all of like the positives, but sometimes we fail to address the challenges. So I think that that's something really important to discuss throughout this presentation as well. And that kind of brings me to my next theme, that in general, you know, LGBTQ life, it exists worldwide everywhere. But in terms of the degree to which it's visible and also supported does vary greatly around the world, which really does come into play when you're planning for study abroad. So with that said, I was going to give Nathan the floor if you would like to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Hey, y'all. First of all, could we hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, great. Hi, y'all. My name is Nathaniel Kulung, but you can call me Nathan. I use he, him pronouns. I am a second year studying the history of public policy and law at UC Santa Barbara. In addition to that, I am also one of the programming assistants at our Resource Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity, aka the UCSB's Pride Center. I am so honored and happy to be here with y'all, talk about LGBTQ processes of study abroad here at UC Santa Barbara. Hopefully it's applicable to you. Janine, thank you for the introduction, and I'm so, again, happy to be with all of you today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nathan. I'm so grateful for your insights and your support throughout all of this. Next, I would like to introduce you to our panelists. So joining us today, we have 5 EAP panelists that have kindly volunteered their time to speak with you all about their experiences. They all studied abroad in different countries and should be able to offer you some unique perspectives, I would say, on what it's like studying abroad as someone who identifies with the LGBTQ plus community. The second half of the presentation will be reserved for Q&A, so please save any questions you may have for them. So I want to give them a chance to introduce themselves. B, would you like to introduce yourself and let us know your pronouns, which campus you're from, where and when you studied abroad, and why you chose specifically to study abroad in your host country.
Yeah, of course. Hi, my name is B. I'm a senior. I work at the UCSB EAP Study Abroad office. So I've been a peer advisor for this last year. And the year before that, I studied abroad at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Um, Fantastic experience. Personally, I identify as non-binary and like queer. So I definitely was concerned before I studied abroad. That proved to not be a big deal at all. I can't wait to get into it. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and B also works at our office as a peer advisor. So for any of the Santa Barbara campus folks that are here, she's a great resource if you would like to follow up after this meeting and have any additional questions. Next we have Angelina.
Hi, my name is Angelina. I am a fourth year at UCSB. I am also, I work in Associated Students with the Trans and Queer Commission as the co-chair, but I studied abroad in France just a few weeks ago. I just left, I just got back to the US. My program was the Social Justice and Activism program. It was a lot of fun, and I too was like, oh, I see, should I pause? There's a hand raised.
I didn't see.
Hi, sorry, Angelina. Someone brought up a really good point, Janine. Are we able to share the slides right now?
Can they not see them?
Oh no.
You can't see the presentation?
No, sorry. I don't think we have seen the presentation just yet.
Really? Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm so glad you cut me
Apologies,
off.
Angelina. I just really quickly.
Yeah, I can just wait or I can go, whatever you guys prefer.
Thanks for cutting me off. Can you see it? Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
you can see the panelists
Yes.
Got it. Yeah, thank you, Janine.
and B. Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know.
Okay, as I was saying, I'm a fourth year at UCSB. I'm a sociology and political science major. And I just studied abroad in the winter, and my program was the Social Justice and Activism program in Paris, France. I too was a little worried about not being able to find queer folks, queer community, but thankfully I did. Like some on my program, some outside, and I really loved Paris, so I would recommend going there.
Great, thank you, Angelina. Shresh, would you be able to share with us, introduce yourself, your pronouns, which campus you're from, and where and when you studied abroad?
Yeah, my name is Shresh. I go by any pronouns. I go to UC Davis. Fun fact, I also work at our LGBTQ center. I'm actually there right now. I studied abroad at National University of Singapore in the fall of 2023, so a few months ago. Yes, going there, I was also quite worried about what the situation was with like queer people, but I was lucky to find a very vibrant queer community there, and it was wonderful.
Great, love Singapore, thank you. Lee, would you like to introduce yourself?
I believe you're showing Sloane's slide first, so I will let them go.
Sloan, would you like to introduce yourself? There we go.
Yeah, hi. I'm Sloan. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a third year sociology student at UCSB right now, and in this past fall, I was in Sweden at Lund University, and I loved it. A couple of these pictures are from like queer pride events during my time abroad, so I was really able to find a great community, and I'm really excited for you guys to also get to explore that.
Great. Thank you, Sloan. Thank you for being here. And Lee.
Hi, my name's Lee. I use they, them pronouns. I studied at Yonsei University in South Korea in fall 2022. So a bit of a while ago, but I think about my time there all the time. I'm now graduated. That was my last year. So I also, like everyone, I'm sure had a lot of worries about finding my community, especially in a country that tends to be more closed and not so open about LGBTQ things comparatively to America and many other countries. But I think I'll get to talk a lot about my experiences later on.
Great. Well, thank you everyone so much for being here. It's extremely valuable for students to have access to your voices. So I really appreciate you volunteering your time to be here with us today. So just a quick little overview for today's agenda. I'm going just to provide a quick overview of UCEAP and some of the benefits of studying abroad with us. And then next we'll delve into strategies and resources students of the LGBTQ community should consider or be aware of prior to going abroad. And then it'll be kind of an open floor for you to ask questions to our panelists. So first and foremost, studying abroad during your college years really does allow you to experience a new culture, live as a local abroad, add that international perspective on your academics, and of course, further understand your identity within a global context. I believe that a rewarding and safe international experience starts with being knowledgeable of how one's gender or possibly sexual orientation will affect interactions in foreign environments. So the objectives of this session is to discuss the benefits of studying abroad with UCEAP, shed light on the challenges, as well as discuss like the right questions to ask when preparing for study abroad. We have a ton of resources also available to you across campus, as well as ones just kind of floating out in the internet world. And then, yes, hear from our UCEAP alumni. So why even study abroad? Some of the benefits I would say are you're ultimately investing in the academic, personal, professional areas of your life. Studying abroad with UCEAP really does allow students to distinguish themselves in their undergraduate experience, as well as expand your network. And not often thought of prior to departure, but oftentimes students do come back citing that they feel a lot more confident and self-sufficient after returning from their study abroad journey. So some of the other benefits are you will remain a UC student and will automatically earn UC units for all courses taken abroad. Students have been known to fulfill major minor GE requirements as well and partake in internships and research. If you're looking to master a language, there's no better way of doing this than living abroad. And if you're a financial aid recipient, your aid should follow with you. You also will have the support of EAP staff here on campus at the system-wide office. And when you arrive on site, they will greet you. So speaking of support, part of having a supportive system is exactly why we're doing this Exploring Your Identity Abroad series. So now that we've talked a little bit about why you should study abroad, I think that we can talk about strategies and resources that are available to you. So we'll talk about topics to research prior to choosing a program, questions to ask yourself, and then I can provide some links to those resources. So there's a lot of things to kind of unpack and think about for any student preparing to study abroad. And then especially as a member of the LGBTQ community, there are some additional questions that you might want to consider as you prepare. So some of those relate to laws abroad. So what are the laws, for example, regarding sexual orientation and gender identity in your host country? Sometimes laws in regards to like same-sex marriage, changing gender adoption and so forth really do differ from country to country. Is it safe to express your sexual orientation and gender identity in the host country and or region? Are there certain relationships or sexual practices that are illegal in the host country? For example, I know in some Middle Eastern countries, like kissing in public is illegal. You can get ticketed for that. On the topic of health, some questions that you can ask yourself are, where can you find LGBTQ plus inclusive medical care, for example, in your host country? If you have any medication, like, can you take that in your host country, and what are the legal amounts as well? Some other things like sexual health products, how readily available are they in your host country? On the topic of community, you want to ask questions such as, what are just the general attitudes of the host country that you're interested in towards people, LGBTQ, people who identify with the LGBTQ community? And also how like open you will be with your teachers and your peers, friends, host family. And if there is an active LGBTQ community abroad that you would be able to connect with as well, and if that's even important to you. Regarding transgendered students abroad, if your gender presentation is different from your legal sex, or if you're in the process of transitioning, for example, ask yourself what challenges you might face with travel, immigration, and documents. And then also if you can possibly access transition-related care while you're abroad as well. Identification documents are important for transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming students going abroad. So just be sure to check the federal government policies around trans identifying Americans with travel and identification and so forth. And I know it's also possible to apply for name changes and as well as gender marker changes. And our CSGD is a great resource if you have questions about that as well. For living abroad, the last note here, like what types of housing are available in your program, and do you want specific, if you want to live with a host family, like do you want to specifically request a family that is known to be supportive of LGBTQ plus students? Just kind of assessing how important these things are to you to plan accordingly. So we have some really great resources. Feel free to take a screenshot of this, or I can also send them to you in a separate email if you would like me to follow up with you. The two at the top, the U.S. Department State LGBT Travelers. This is where you can review specific country information to wherever you're interested in studying abroad to get a feel for what challenges you might face when studying abroad. It gives a good representation of laws and attitudes in some different countries, and then it also provides like tips for before you travel and also while you're abroad. The Equaldex, this is a collaborative LGBTQ rights knowledge-based database, and you can explore progress of LGBTQ rights across the world. So things such as public opinions or views on same-sex marriage and other legal recognitions. They can provide like color-coded maps showing you the acceptance rates across the world. At our campus, we have a specific brochure that is just for LGBTQ plus students that gives a lot of really great info. A lot of the questions that I just went over in the last slide are also included on there, so feel free to check that out. I've linked our CSGD's website as well. they have great resources too, and we'll be incorporating some study abroad info into their website in the near future as well. I've included resources from UC Merced, Santa Cruz too, kind of similar to what we have at our campus. It's just campus specific in terms of for their LGBTQ students. So if you're from one of those campuses, feel free to check out those resources as well. I mean, it doesn't matter what campus you're from, you can check out any of these resources. They're available to all students. The UCEAP course catalog, it's a historical database. It shows you what past students have done in our programs. And it's kind of useful if you are interested in taking classes that focus on gender and sexuality abroad. You can search by keyword and see what programs might offer things if that is your interest or field of study. Any questions about the resources that I've listed out here? Okay. Oops. All right, well, that's about all for me. I don't want to do too much of the talking because I really do want to give you an opportunity to hear from our panelists. So this is just going to be an open floor for you to ask questions, put them into the chat, or feel free to unmute yourselves, and our panelists will answer accordingly. I'll ask the first question just to get us started. So I'm curious to know, what were the attitudes and the public opinions of your host country towards the LGBTQ plus community? And were you aware of this before you went abroad? Let's start with Sloan.
I would say that I was in Sweden, which part of the reason I was drawn to go to Sweden is because I'm a sociology major, and a lot of the classes I took before I went abroad were gender and sexuality, feminist studies classes. And so I was really interested to go to a place where I knew that they were at least very gender progressive. And so I assumed that there was going to be a lot of that with like queerness as well. And I would say that for the most part, it really was like, I don't think I really ever had a bad experience, which I feel very lucky about. But it was a big queer community, and like most, I would say the majority of the other UC students who also who were there at the same time were queer. So we had a community with ourselves, and then we were able to also find community out and around. So I think the attitudes of the host country were very just accepting, and it also attracted a lot of people to, it seems, from the UCs, which was really cool.
Did you feel like the attitudes were really similar to your experience here in the United States and at UCSB?
I, in some ways, I think yes, in the sense that it's like accepting, but I honestly feel like, and maybe it's not a Sweden specific thing, it kind of seemed this way, like with a lot of the other international students who were European, that over there, like labeling sexuality didn't feel like as big of a deal. And you were sort of just kind of free to like who you liked. And, you know, like when I asked some friends I made who were not Americans about their sexuality, they usually seem to be a lot more like relaxed about it, of like, I don't know, it's kind of just like I'm exploring, or I just kind of, you know, don't have a label on it. So I thought that was really interesting. And I don't know if that's specific to the host country or just more like a European or maybe Scandinavian attitude.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see. I'm curious, B, did you have a similar experience being in Scotland, since that's also a European country?
Yes, I think generally speaking, pretty similar. I knew going in that it was something I was worried about. I think I had a list of things where I was like, can you check on this before I, put in my application to my regional advisor at UCSB? And she was like, absolutely. And so she like just went through the list, and one of them was like, you know, I'm queer, I'm trans, like, am I gonna get hate crimes there? Like, I just don't really know where to start. And she did some research for me, and she was like, it seems really chill. I was really worried because J.K. Rowling used to live there or something, and I was like, is this gonna be like really triggering, or like are people going to be constantly talking about it and it's like some hot topic? It wasn't. It came up a few times. There were a lot of Harry Potter tours and stuff, and I remember like another American was, it came up with mostly other Americans who were like defending her, or like, and I was like, okay, whatever. I these people never really knew I was trans personally. I kind of went back into the closet a bit in terms of my gender identity. It wasn't something that was talked about that much there. And I think it's something to do with like some Scottish English reservedness where they just don't talk about that stuff. But I don't think people would judge me. And when I was asked my pronouns, I think I would answer honestly, usually. But I just wasn't asked that much. And I think it was not something people felt comfortable asking each other to an extent, not because it wasn't okay, but just because it wasn't like, I was definitely more open about it. There were certainly queer spaces. There was a pride society there that I was a part of, which is very similar to our club here, and they had a lot of events, and in those spaces it was much more common to be asked my gender expression. But I remember I didn't really talk to my roommates about it. I just didn't let them know because I was like, they don't need to know this. But I mean, I think now that I'm not living with them, they know. Came out to them like after the program ended. Yeah, no big deal at all. But it's just, it was
Okay.
different.
Yeah, it sounds like, although similar to here, still a little maybe more not as lax in Scotland as it is in Sweden, is kind of the feel that I'm getting.
Yeah, and in comparison to Santa Barbara, I felt like I could dress a lot more out there. Like I was dressing, for lack of a better word, gayer. Like I was definitely experimenting, being more flamboyant. I felt like I could recognize queer people a lot easier, but I don't know. People just talked about it less, which was, I thought was interesting.
Yeah. That point that you made about following up with your regional advisor, I think is really great. Don't be hesitant to reach out to your regional advisor to ask them to connect with the university if need be. We are absolutely a liaison for you and can reach out to any university to kind of ask that question. What are the attitudes of your faculty, staff, and just overall, do you have any statements about DEI and inclusion and things like that? If you are curious about a particular institution. Yeah, that's a really great point you made.
Yeah, also you're protected by FERPA, so it's not like we can talk about how you see yourself or identify in any way to other people outside of the
Absolutely.
laws and
Yeah,
stuff.
definitely all confidential in terms of if you do decide to disclose something like that to one of your advisors. Does anyone have any questions that they want to drop into the chat? I think I see one. This is for Lee. How is the LGBTQ community like in Seoul and at Yonsei? Was finding community easy?
So I will say up front that I don't feel like I personally was specifically seeking a lot of LGBTQ spaces or communities. I was lucky enough to meet some people within the program who also went to Davis, but I didn't know them before, that were queer. And we had interests in like seeking out stuff like drag shows and going to like trans clubs and things like that. I would say, first of all, in Seoul, it's definitely more open than other parts of Korea. Seoul is a much more progressive space, especially because I will say in our Yonsei program, you will be near the university a lot more, which means being amongst a younger generation, like a younger crowd, and people our age tend to be a lot more open and okay with that. I will say, like, in the entire time I was there for 4 months. I probably saw like 3 queer couples like out in the open, and there wasn't anything weird about it. Like, there wasn't any like people staring, you know, like, from my perspective, there wasn't people staring, and there wasn't any judgment, there was no harassment. But at the same time, I will say, comparatively, you know, compared to Europe or America, it is definitely kind of like keep quiet type thing. I had a professor talk about, it was an international business communications course, and he was talking about, I guess, like, you know, when you're gay in Korea, you like don't tell people about it. Like, you just, he was like, this was like a whole lesson that he had. He was like, when you're gay, you like keep it to yourself. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, but also don't tell people. Like, they don't need to know. Like, it's just a very closed off thing. I will say though, in Seoul, there are a lot of trans clubs, and they are kind of closed off to foreigners in a sense. I think that's more so like in a protective sense. They were very nervous to let foreigners into their very closed and protective space. And that wasn't something that we really pushed at. I personally was like, trans club sounds fun. If we could go, would love to be with some local trans people. But they kind of had this like, oh, maybe like we only, I think what they said is they only serve whiskey. And that was a really strange way of being like, you're not 100% welcome to come in. I'm sure if we were like, we love whiskey, they would have been like, okay, fine, come on in. But we kind of left it alone. I think there is definitely, and that goes across for a lot of LGBTQ spaces in Asia, I would say, unless they're a little bit more open. In the more closed off sections, I would say they tend to be protective of their spaces.
They were trying to deter people with whiskey. Is that what you said?
Yes, I mean, I was with some friends where half of our group is queer and half is not. And I think, you know, none of us are, for lack of better words, like passing or non-passing in terms of trans. Like, we weren't necessarily like open about being trans or very obvious about it. And so they weren't like, oh, these are trans people looking to have fun with us. And so it can kind of be something that they don't really want to be open to. If we were a little bit maybe more queer coded in how we dressed and how we acted, maybe it would have been something that would be more open. But they were like, yeah, with their very little bit of English, they told us they only serve whiskey, which was, I think, an interesting way to be like, we don't really want just anyone to come in.
Yeah, very indirect. Can I hear from Shresh? Sorry, I feel like I'm still not pronouncing your name right. Can you say it again?
No, that was good. Shresh.
Okay, great. Shresh, can you speak about Singapore and if it's similar at all to Lee's experience in South Korea?
Yeah, it definitely was somewhat similar, because I know a lot of Asian countries are a lot more like conservative in that sense. And I was definitely worried going into Singapore about this, because I really wanted to go there because I heard like the food was amazing. Like, it's a very modernized country, super clean, super safe. And also I wanted to travel a lot of Asia, which is very accessible. So I was very set on Singapore, which is why I put like this aside going there. And yeah, mostly before going, I'd like talk to people who lived in Singapore to see what the situation was. And after living there, I can say that it definitely was very hush hush, but I felt more safe there than like I've ever felt here, honestly, because it's like one of the safest countries in the world. And like, for the most part, if I was to dress up and go out and look like more quote unquote queer, then I would just get stared at, and like occasionally people would take pictures, but they wouldn't really like, I never experienced anyone saying anything to me. There was no like threat of violence, because that just like didn't really happen in that country, which was nice, but definitely took a bit more courage to like dress up and go out. And I was also I'm double majoring in design and dance. So while I was there, I was taking a lot of like performance studies or theater classes that would count for my degree. So I was very exposed to like the theater community of Singapore and National University of Singapore, as well as a lot of people who are my age. And obviously they were very queer. So I met a lot of I found that once I moved there, I met so many queer people. Like, I was like, wow, do I just attract a certain type of people or what is it? But through them, I got to learn a lot more about the community there. And they do have a very like, they have an underground like nightlife scene. They had weekly drag shows. They had like gay clubs and things. I will say a lot of them were more like the audience there was primarily like cis gay men. And it was like overall less inclusive of like trans people or like queer women, but overall still quite good from what I experienced. Oh, also, another thing is they didn't really talk much about like pronouns. There weren't very many conversations about that. I actually had a talk with one of my professors who was about like inclusive language because I noticed it was like somewhat harming one of my local classmates who kept getting misgendered in class. And like he was very open to it, but it was clear that like the education wasn't there and like the conversations weren't really happening very much. But I think a lot of the professors that I had in the theater department were like very ready to like learn more about it. They were just like lacking the resources.
Sounds like you were really able to get involved and find community there. I love that.
Yeah, I did. I wasn't like particularly looking for it. I feel like I just stumbled upon it.
Yeah, that's cool though. Either way, however it happens, I think that's awesome. Kind of on that note, I feel like you actually answered a few questions that I had here. Just in terms of, I'm curious, because some of you mentioned that you were out, or maybe you revealed it at the end of your time abroad or so forth, or perhaps you didn't vocalize it, but you showed it in other ways. So I'm just kind of curious, how did being out or not out influence your experience? Did you want to touch
Yeah.
on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, it wasn't like I would say I wouldn't say I wasn't out, but I would say I was slightly less out than I am here, if that makes sense. As in, I wouldn't like dress up as often or like show it too much. But also, I think I'm the type of person that if you meet me, you can immediately tell that I'm queer. And I don't think it had too big of an influence. Like I didn't feel too different from how I live my life here because a lot of the people I was around were also like exchange students from like either North America or like Europe or Australia. So I think there the attitudes are relatively similar. And also I was traveling a lot of Asia and there were a lot more like conservative countries that I went to. So I think I found that I was just more cautious in the sense in like how I presented myself outwardly. But also there's a lot of safety that comes with just like being a foreigner or being a traveler. Like people they won't like, I guess they care a bit less. So I think for certain countries, I was really just like paying attention to how I look because I think that was the main teller.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. I think that's really insightful. Does anyone else want to share how being out or not out influenced your experience abroad? Maybe Angelina?
I was definitely out in my program. Like I was like asking, I quickly made a group of friends and I was like, is anyone like in community? And like one person was, my program was very, very cis female, but there ended up being just a few people who were like non-binary and bisexual. And I was like, thank God I'm not the only like queer person in this program because there was like 50 of us. So like I was openly seeking it. Like I was like, let's go to, you know, a queer club, let's go to like these queer events. I only ended up going to like maybe one or two, but like my group, who was primarily like straight girls, were very open and inclusive to trying to like find events for those of us who were queer. So that was nice. I was gonna say about Paris, similar to the other people who were in Europe, Paris is very covert about identities in general. Like, it's strange to Americans, but like they don't really like talking about personal details at all. So, you know, sexuality is included in that. And I remember I went to a language exchange and I asked somebody their pronouns and they were like, wow, nobody's ever asked me that before. So I was really surprised by that. My instructors were super like ready to talk about it. They like in my language course, she said that there is now shifting towards like more general neutral language, but it's very new. So it's not being adopted like as rapidly. But yeah, I would say like y'all have said before, that style was a very good indicator too, but it's just not openly discussed unless like you become close to the people in the host country, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool though, that someone had never been asked their pronouns before and you were that person for them. I think that's kind of cool in terms of study abroad in general, that you're in an unfamiliar environment and they've maybe never met someone that comes from a place that is more accepting, for example. So I think that we can be influential throughout the world by studying abroad, which is really great. On that note, does anyone have any follow-up questions or anything else you would like to ask at this moment? Anybody in our audience? Melissa, faculty member who leads study abroad courses for UC Davis. Nice to meet you. Also a member of the LGBTQ community. We're wondering if any of the panelists has a #1 piece of advice to offer LGBTQ students about studying abroad.
This might be kind of a not necessarily positive piece of advice, but I think for me, I had to think of, or I just had to think about balancing who I was and what I was willing to give up to be in a country that isn't necessarily 100% welcoming. That's something that I prepared for myself a lot. And I was lucky to not run into any problems on behalf of my gender identity or sexuality. But that is something that I think you should consider. Like we're lucky to live in a lot more opening times and places within California. But the reality is in other countries, it's not always like that. And I think there is, I guess, an expectation that you might have to give up hiding part of yourself again, or if you don't want to hide part of yourself again, being willing to step outside of your comfort zone to seek the places that will keep you safe and things like that.
Absolutely. I think that's amazing advice.
Thank you so much. That's great.
I also have an answer. Definitely relate to that though. I think that also just getting involved, getting that safety net kind of as soon as possible was really helpful for me. And I think they all kind of work together. I was in a lot of clubs abroad, and I met a lot of queer people through my non-queer clubs as well. So that was awesome. I remember there was a Pride Week for my book club, and I was like, thank you. Actually, it was a month. It was Pride Month for my book club, and I was like, this is great. And then, yeah, I mean, the clubs also tell you about other clubs that are like similar or whatever. And so I joined clubs through my clubs. But so that was awesome. I would, yeah, just say get involved. Especially in Pride organizations if they have them, because I got really good at like knowing when I wanted to like putting myself out there, becoming more confident and knowing like my limits. Like I'm really good now at setting boundaries because I'm like, okay, when I was abroad, I was in all these clubs and I knew when I needed a night out and I needed to go with the Pride Club to a pub crawl or whatever. Or I needed like I knew when that reading my books or doing my train rail society, like wanted to do a trip with them, and just, you know, it's great to have different groups is really the point I'm trying to make.
Would anyone else like to share any advice that they would give LGBTQ students studying abroad?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. I don't know if this kind of sort of goes without saying maybe, but like really, sorry, but really just like take it slow at first and like really like feel out the vibes, essentially, to like see how the attitudes are around people. Because at some point it usually does come up in conversation and then you can really tell. And then, yeah, just like think about like what it would cost, like Lee was saying.
Kind of assess the situation first before you just delve right in. Yeah. It looks like Missy has a question.
Yeah, I'm going to a place this summer. I'm going to Guatemala, and LGBTQ is really not accepted there. Like same-sex marriage is illegal, and like non-binary is not recognized, and like I'm non-binary. So I'm like trying to like I'm gonna dye my hair back to normal and try and dress normal and stuff like that. And I'm considering like using she, her pronouns, even though those aren't my pronouns. And like, is there any advice that you have if like there is no queer community, like it just doesn't exist?
Maybe Lee would be able to touch upon that a little bit.
Yeah, I think I will say that your situation sounds a little bit tougher than mine. Like I wouldn't be able to speak to the full extent of having no community. And I think it is hard to say that there is no community because often in places where being queer is illegal, there are a lot of hidden spaces. And that's where you're gonna have to like really dig deep to find those things, to find your piece. Personally, I would say if these are things that are going to bother you, then you should try to find things that would like mitigate that discomfort. Like maybe, you know, I like it's great to connect with the local people, but stick close with the people who are in your program as well. Those are people who should be respecting you because they're from here and they know better than to disrespect your pronouns or who you are. But at the same time, I think there's 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 a lot of research you can do online, like on Reddit and like little communities and stuff that you can do to search for, you know, like queer spaces, for example, and queer clubs. Like they might be a lot smaller and not as active or whatever, but they definitely exist. So if those are things that are going to be important to you, then I don't think that you have to sacrifice everything that you are just to find comfort or to be safe. And remember that like regardless of like where you are, you should, you know, you should be safe. Like you're going to be within a program, so you know, reach out to your like whoever is like in charge of your program and things like that, and make sure that you know this, they know that this is a concern for you and they can help you find resources.
Yeah,
I
I would.
also, oh no, continue.
Oh
Sorry.
yeah, I was just gonna, yeah, I would like to echo everything that Lee just said. And also, I think one thing that helped me going to like a little bit more of a conservative country was really just remembering why I was going there in the first place. Because for me, I really wanted to like travel and like experience culture. So I was using that as like my first motivator to go there and like keep that's what was like really getting me excited all the time. And then finding this queer community was like an afterthought in a way. So I think just keeping that in mind really helped me. Also, I do know a queer person who went to Argentina and Chile. If you want me to connect you with them, you can message me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it
can
just always helps to hear. Oh, sorry, go ahead, B.
I was also just gonna say that I think you'd be surprised how many like I think yeah, throwing yourself into why you're going, like I definitely did a lot of just I was just working. Like if I wasn't traveling, I was focusing on school and when again I would throw yourself into some of your other interests because that's how I met a lot of the people that like it's not doesn't have to be a queer club. It can be like a crocheting club or like you know you'd be surprised like how many I think queer people share your interests and I don't know. I think that was a great way for me to meet people. It was probably very different in Guatemala, but um I don't know, places are places and people are people. There are gay people everywhere.
Anyone else want to add any additional thoughts on that? Okay. Any other questions from the audience at this moment? Okay, I'll ask another question. If someone is on the fence about studying abroad, what would you say to them? Maybe Sloan can answer this one.
If you're on the fence about studying abroad, I would say to just do it, which I'm pretty confident that almost everybody else who I know who has studied abroad would say the same. Like, it is such a like enriching experience, and it just, you realize really how big the world is when you're living somewhere else and you're like, whoa, I made it here basically on my own. Like, you move yourself across the world for at least a few months, like it gives you such, it's so empowering, and then you're really just figuring out how to like live your life, and it's the coolest thing ever. You meet so many like incredible people, and a lot like other people have said, like you can go travel, get to see the world. It's just a great opportunity. I just really think like there is a place that you would love to go. So if you're on the fence about it, do it. Just do it.
Just do it. I love that. Angelina, did you want to give some advice to someone who's on the fence about studying abroad?
So echoing Sloan again, please go for it. Don't let anything hold you back. If you want to do it, just like let your intuition, guide you and make it happen, because I was really scared. It's like, had so much anxiety about doing it, and I'm so glad I did it. It helps you grow in ways you never thought possible. And like the picture of me there is like the moment I realized like, whoa, I'm actually here. And I was just like I don't know, it just opens the doors to like so many opportunities, and just makes you grow as a person so much. Like you won't know until you're in it. And I think if you want to do it, just make it happen. And like, the EAP offices will help you make that happen. And like, there's so many people who are out there who can support you on your journey to like applying all the way till when you're there, and when you come back, adjusting to like being in the US again, and like reverse culture shock. It'll be amazing, I promise.
Anyone else? All right. I think those are some great pieces of advice. We're kind of nearing the end here. I do want to see if there's any follow-up questions, any remaining questions from the audience that you would like to ask last minute.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone. All the panelists were great. It was really great for me as an instructor to hear from you and to think about things from your perspective studying abroad. And I also want to have a shout out to Shreist, who I think was one of my students in a course a year or so ago. Is that right, Shreist? You were in my UWP 12 class, I think.
I believe so, yeah.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Truly is a small world. That is so cool that you guys know each other. All right, well, just a few key takeaways if there's no other questions. Just research your host country, know the laws and attitudes of your host country towards the LGBTQ community. Take advantage of those resources that I shared with you, those links, and feel free to check out our websites as well on our identity pages. And then please consider how you want to express yourself abroad, as well as how do you think that studying abroad will influence your sense of who you are and how you express yourself. So just a few key takeaways there. If you do want access to these slides, you're more than welcome to shoot me an email, and I can always share a PDF with you of the slides as well. And just to kind of let you know about upcoming sessions, part of the Exploring Your Identity Abroad series, we still have a few more left for the quarter. We're representing DSP students abroad, Latinx, Asian American, and Pacific Islander. So you're welcome to hop onto the UCEAP website and check out those sessions too, if you're interested in those pre-departure events. So I think that's about all that I have. Thank you everyone for joining me today. This concludes our session. Thank you, Nathan, for helping me get all set up with the Zoom and introducing yourself from RCSGD. And to our panelists, it really was a pleasure having you here and getting to learn more about you and your experience. I think it's extremely valuable to hear your perspective. So thank you so much for volunteering your time. And to all the attendees, I hope that you enjoyed this session. And yeah, please feel free to attend any upcoming sessions we have. And I look forward to connecting with you all in the future. So thank you all so much. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful evening.